Good morning. I want to thank everybody who joins us. My name is Olena Kramarenko, and I'd like to thank everybody who joins us here in this studio in Ukraine Media Center, Ukrinform, and online. It's day 398 of the full-scale invasion of our homeland by the Russian aggressor, and now we will be talking about the environment. Unfortunately, we're all seeing that the war waged by Russian Federation against us is detrimental to the environment. The scale of this damage is real huge, and now we will be talking about documenting of such crimes. How should we collect evidences? And this is what our conversation today will be devoted to. We will be presenting the training course from online platform Prometheus, how to assess the damage caused by the Russian armed aggression to the environment. Our speakers today are Olena Sas, project manager of the ANTS National Interest Protection Network, Oksana Abduloeva, associate professor at Institute of Biology and Medicine of Taras Shevchenko National University of Kyiv, Maria Ilyina, the head of the Department of Ecosystem Assessment of Natural Resources Potential of the Institute of Environmental Economics and Sustainable Development of the National Academy of Science of Ukraine, Alexander Stavnichuk, the deputy head of the Department of Environmental Control and Methodology, and Oleg Listopad, journalist, ecologist, a retired officer of the armed forces. Ms. Olena, please tell us about this platform. Why did you decide to initiate such a project? Why is it important? Why is it urgent for the time being? Thank you very much. I really am a coordinator of the project that is called Going Together for Ecologic Democracy, Justice and Rule of Law. I represent the non-government organization called ANTS, National Interest Protection Network. Well, this project we will be talking about, it would have been impossible without the financial support of the Department of State of the United States of America. They have the Department of Labor, which financed this project. In coordination with the education platform Prometheus, our project developed a course which is called the assessment of environmental damage caused by Russian aggression. We decided to post it on the open educational platform so the most broad audience of the students could get familiarized with this project, because the matters of technical assessment of the damage caused by the Russian aggression to the environment, its economic aspect, calculation of losses, and legal consequences are matters of our concern. We would like to, well, first of all, it's the goal of our presentation, of our visit today. We would like to draw the attention to the fact that Ukraine suffers significant damage, and to be able to correctly document and realize what are the losses that were inflicted on us, to operate in relevant figures, we need support. We want to get the ecologists involved, we want to get journalists and local governments, representatives of the reserves, national parks, sanctuaries, everybody for whom this situation makes difference. We would like everybody to get involved in this course. Today it was posted on Prometheus. You can get signed up and listen to it or audit, because our country is big, and correct technical documentation of what was going on for all those facts to have consequences, and my colleagues will tell you how it will happen technically, what would be the economic and legal consequences. So for me, as the coordinator of the project, this is my message that I want to send to all of you. Once again, our course is called the Assessment of Environmental Damage Resulting from Russian Aggression, with our partners on Prometheus. We posted it there. We appreciate all their support, and I think that now we could see a short video. I'm asking our technical team to show the video on the screen, and then we will be back to our conversation.
Ці кадри
This footage was made last year after the Russian missile attack on one of our industrial facilities. Everything was burnt out, ready-made products, the cardboard, furniture, computers. The black smoke was in the sky, and the products of burning were washed down to the sewer. The lungs of the workers of the facility, of the firefighters, were clogged with ashes. More than 100 industrial facilities suffered missile strikes by Russian Federation last year. More than 100,000 tons of petroleum products were burned last year. Russia commits economic crimes. We have to prove it with the facts and figures. We have to document the facts and calculate the figures. This is why that our course is dedicated to methods of calculation of losses inflicted on us by Russian Federation. The leading ecologists, lawyers will teach you how to use the legislation, how to calculate the figures. The representatives of our local governments, the business owners, the representatives of utility agencies, forestries, and nature defenders will be able to make use of this course, and the journalists will get tips of how to set priorities, to find the sources of information. And the study of losses inflicted to the environment by Russian Federation will help us to get the compensation from Russian Federation and assist to the sustainable recovery. On the information level, it's yet another layer of information defense. So let's get to work together. Thank you for this work, Ms. Oksana. Let's proceed to the conversation about how can the journalists get involved, and regular Ukrainian civilians, how can everybody get involved in collection of evidences, calculation of losses? Why is it important? Why is it important to document crimes like that? And how these facts could be then taken into account, and what should we do further on with them? Thank you. First of all, I would like to correct you. I don't work with the Taras Shevchenko University anymore. I'm an independent expert, and I was taking part in preparation of this training course by attempting to reflect how to document this damage on the environment in a more correct manner. We all have to remember that it cannot be done randomly. We have to keep our final goal in mind, and the final goal is to submit the case for compensation, and then to receive that compensation that would lay fundamental to the recovery of the environment in future, and recovery of the conditions for healthy life of people and normal life of people. That's why, in fact, today, or maybe the only legal way is the application of methods that are legally recognized, specifically those that are used by environmental inspections experts in their work, and we rely on it in a part of our training course which was dedicated to the technical assessment, and we try to demonstrate that spot for the people who don't have enough knowledge in the area of environmental protection, starting from volunteers and those who want to help document the damage, and with the local residents. We want to show them the way to document this damage to the environment and to have it documented in a way that can be used as evidence to be submitted to compensation agencies or courts to enforce compensation for the damage inflicted. Thank you. Thank you. Mr. Alexander, I wanted to ask you as a representative of the state, to what extent collection of such evidences helps you? How active is this work in the government agencies? How is it advancing? Do we have any materials already to sue the aggressor country? Good morning, everybody. Thank you for the question. We already have registered and submitted to the Ministry of Justice 7 method sets. We already calculate losses in 4 areas: atmospheric air, soil, water resources. So our inspection works in this area. Already 2 trillion hryvnia of losses are already calculated, and it's only the beginning because there is still a lot of work ahead. We have to calculate everything that is related to the forests, the reserves, sanctuaries. This is what we still have ahead of us. As to the soils, the preliminary assessment is already done. It's about 10 trillion hryvnias loss, so you understand that those costs are real big amounts of money, and our main goal is to have all those costs compensated. For this, on the level of the government, we work with our international partners for months already. So the relevant experts from our side are trying to find relevant ways of this compensation, whether it would be an international court or a United Nations committee. All those calculations are made by the operation headquarters and other agencies, which will continue calculating the losses. So according to all those methods, there are video footages and photographic documents added to all those cases. So we want to involve the community to support us in that, so we could gather all these evidence base with a lot of details. In future, if those techniques will be needed to be amended, it will not be a hell of a problem to amend the calculations. Still, in every case, we will have something just to add in case of necessity, and then we will submit it for indemnification. So the Ministry of Environment will be the agency, the ministry responsible for compilation of all that information. After all of our citizens of Ukraine, the ecologists, environmentalists, journalists will get involved in collection and accumulation of this information. So it's the Ministry of Environmental Protection who will accumulate all that information. Yes, we will do it in coordination with probably Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and it will all be then handed over to the court. But I think it will be strictly formulated in the international documents who, how, and in what manner submits what information. Thank you very much, Miss Maria. Let's talk about calculation of losses. We are really used to the fact that frequently in the open sources and in media we talk about the losses inflicted on us by the occupiers in different areas of our life, but when we talk about the environment, it's real difficult for an average Ukrainian to understand how this calculation is going on. Is there such a component in this technique, in this project? How to calculate it? How is it actually happening? Thank you very much, dear colleagues. Both the community and the journalists and just interested people who are curious about the real losses, the real amount of losses resulting from war for the environment of Ukraine, they probably use the application EcoZagroza, ecologic threat. Those who ever used it, they know that there are figures, the initial approximate figures of the losses already inflicted as of today by the warfare operations. Mr. Alexander already mentioned this figure. It's about 2 trillion hryvnia. It's real big, but the real figure will be way bigger because the calculated losses are not yet calculated for all the components of the environment. Not all of the negative consequences and negative connections are taken into account, and it's resulting first of all from the lack of data. It's a very complicated and complex work, and also the experts and the representatives of the government, they don't have really access to the territories which are mostly affected by the warfare operations. It is expected that the losses will be way bigger after more of the territory of Ukraine will be deoccupied, and we would be able to realize to what extent they are catastrophic. I mean, those consequences, sometimes those that affect may grow with time, and some ecosystems, as environmentalists know, they are very complicated systems, and collecting data about them is a very meticulous process which requires very diligent everyday work and cooperation of all the parties involved, like the representatives of the government, the journalists, and the local communities. We already mentioned the techniques for calculation of losses, and it's necessary to say that the ministry just finished very complicated work about related to the development of these techniques. The techniques were developed based on the resolution of the Cabinet of Ministers as to the calculation of the losses inflicted by the Russian aggression. And that resolution was adopted on that March 20 last year, within, I would say, first month from the beginning of the full-scale aggression, and those techniques were started to be developed. So in this course, we draw attention of everybody that those techniques, they are not very complex for understanding by an average Ukrainian, but they give you understanding of what indicators should be considered to understand the overall picture, the overall amount of the losses. And what's also necessary to take into account, that calculation of the losses is not only done to be submitted to the international courts for indemnification, but also to understand what will be the expenditures to be compensated to the businesses, like the forestries. The businesses, they will all face the fact that the expenses for the recovery of infrastructure or natural resources, they are like non-customary expenses. But I hope that our work will find people who will appreciate it, and you will find time and effort to find those proofs for the indemnification of the losses. Well, the work, Mr. Oleg, that you're doing by the journalist is colossal, but as to the environmental crimes, what is the specificity here, and how is it different from other areas of your activity? The war it unveiled a lot of problems that existed way before the full-scale invasion and before the year 2014. It proved that the environment should not be neglected, and the Ministry of Environmental Protection is an extremely important government agency. If you check out the publications, you will see that one of the biggest critics of the activities of this ministry is me. And for those who defend the existence of the ministry, well, you will notice my name on that list again. This summer there was another attempt to liquidate this ministry, but no matter how cynical it sounds, but the war saved this agency because it proved the importance of its role, specifically in the area of documenting of those losses that we talk about. Also, the war proved our legislation to be imperfect. We say that those are the losses to the environment, but if we dig deeper, we understand that it's not about the losses on and damage on the environment, but it's the damage to the health of the citizens. This is how it's being interpreted from the Soviet era. So this is why we have to amend the law of on the protection of environment, but it doesn't nullify the importance of the ministry. We just have to dig deeper. We have to look more profoundly, and we should not hesitate to dig deeper into those layers. So why do I recommend this course? You can get the certificate after graduation from there. It's easy to sign up on Prometheus. It's free. You can do it anytime online. I'm a Prometheus user myself. I was serving in one of the Territorial Defense Forces Battalion as a psychologist. I graduated from 2 courses in this area, psychology during the war, and it was a very convenient course. I was serving in the Kharkiv region, and I was only able to graduate when I got back from the battle operations. So in my part of the course, I was trying to show the problematic points. What are the correct questions to be asked from the government officials? That was something that I was convinced about, that the government officials, they don't have proper skills to answer those questions. They will tell you about 2 trillion of losses and to damage to the environment. So, but there's a lot more problems. First thing is to calculate those losses, and yet another thing is to get that indemnification. It's the Minister of Foreign Affairs who works on that matter, and ANTS NGO is yet another organization working in that area. It was founded by Hanna Hopko, who was the head of parliamentary committee in the previous parliament, the Parliamentary Committee on International Relations and Cooperation. So, getting back to the environmental inspection, they were calculating the losses, then they were submitting to the court, but in the best case scenario, they were getting only 1/10 of all the calculated amount. So why? So let's consider other conflicts, for example, between Iraq and Kuwait, where when Iraq burned the oil wells, and then as Kuwait submitted for indemnification, they got only 1/10 of all the losses amount calculated. So let's accept that everything is not that smooth, and those 2 trillions may be transformed into an amount way less than that, however still humongous. And another question is yet how those funds will be distributed. Where should they go? To the state budget, and who will then distribute them among all those forestry sanctuaries and businesses that suffered ecological losses? So those are the questions that we should start asking now already, and we should start asking them not in the some environmental audience, but ask them to everybody, to the government officials, what will be the new standards to be accounted. We have the plan for country recovery. There is work underway according to those plans, and we understand that those funds would be spent according to that plan. And I think that there are still a lot of things missing from that plan, and those things should be added. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Oleg. I'm seeing we have the representatives of foreign media in the studio. How can they get involved in this process? They visit the areas of battle operations quite frequently where the war crimes are being committed. To what extent can we get our foreign colleagues involved in this process? Well, their attention is invaluable, because to get those funds for us, to get this compensation, we have to create the mechanisms of Russian assets confiscation that can be further on be forwarded for indemnification of our losses. So if Ms. Galina would have been present here, who was reading the legal course, she would have told you about the legal Rammstein that was happening this summer. The legal experts from the United States, for example, they help us to improve the international law to support us. What are the problems existing in that area, and those international legal mechanisms should be described there. Sometimes the foreign audience, they don't understand that it's not only about the deaths of people, but it's about also the damage and losses to the environment that affect our health. It's a terrible thought, but due to the stress, we will all live less. We will all have shorter lives, and those who were living in the areas directly affected, who were breathing all those detrimental burning products, and who were drinking that contaminated water, their lives will be shorter. All those things, they are invaluable parts of our environment. For example, there are the forest lands in the fields. They at the harvest 20%, and after they are demined. That's yet another huge topic about the mine threat. It's not included in this course, but in fact people cannot get to their favorite places of recreation. They will not get recreated in a normal way as they used to do. Those forest lines, they are cut to the ground. Nothing can do as much harm as those shells do to those forest lines, and we have to dig trenches in there because there is no other way to survive for our military. Russia has to pay for all of it, and I would like to ask our foreign friends and even our foreign enemies, so that they read and understand what we're losing. An important moment there. If you've read last article by Soros, he devoted it to two topics. One is our war. He said that Ukraine should be supported. It's extremely important. And another aspect was climatic trend, climatic problems. And what's happening here is a problem for all the world. Because first of all, it's those huge forest fires, destruction of the forest lights. You know, our Earth, it's small, and if something is happening in one spot, in fact, it has some negative consequences for everybody all over the world. And the funds that could be forwarded to the improvement of climate, they are spent on war. Russia spends huge money on war. Meanwhile, they have oil spills. They have oil spills in the ocean. They have fires in the Siberian region. No one puts them out, those fires. So those are important aspects, and I would like our foreign colleagues also to mention them. What I wanted to add to this matter. There is an initiative now between the government agencies, specifically state ecological inspection and international organizations and Ministry of Environment, UNICE, UNEP, and OSCE. On the other hand, there is a cooperation between them. It's an interagency working team whose goal is to develop the mechanisms, the techniques, the methods for documenting and calculation of losses that will be used based on the example of Ukraine, and which would further on serve as fundamentals for international mechanism for documenting and calculating of losses resulting from different types of conflicts all over the world. So this is what I would like to have the attention of a journalist drawn to. We have questions in the studio. Oleg Tkachuk, Ukrinform, about the continuation of cooperation. You mentioned this initiative. Could you tell us in more detail about that initiative and with what international institutions Ukraine already cooperates in terms of calculation of losses? We understand that it's a lengthy process. Well, I think that the State Environmental Inspection, they have more information about this topic, but I want to say that there is a number of international organizations that I mentioned, OSCE, UNICE, UNEP, and there is a range of international partners who are ready to support the initiatives of the Ministry of Environmental Protection in the area of environmental security related to the mitigation of consequences of Russian aggression, and there is a cooperation with American agencies as to the development of mechanisms for documenting and calculation of losses. This is that information that I have. Maybe Mr. Alexander may add a few words about that. Well, as to international organizations, the international program called LIFE is working already. We have about 60 applications, and there will be projects aimed at the recovery of environment. They will be picked further on by the BID committee, and there is the plan for recovery approved by the government. There is a section of this plan called environmental security. The Ministry of Environmental Protection works on that plan. We have 53 projects already. What we want to achieve is to increase the forest areas at least 18%, to increase the areas of the natural reserves at least 30%, create 10 more national parks, and we cooperate in that area with our international partners to improve the situation. Well, I would like to emphasize once again that us as the organization, non-government organization, and we implemented this project, the course, that will help us to assess the losses to the environment. It was made at the cost of the American taxpayers. It was funded by the Bureau for Democracy, Human Rights and Labor and the Department of State. This is the the input of our international colleagues into the development of this course. Mr. Oleg, I'm seeing you don't agree with everything. So today at 1600 there will be an online meeting in the Ministry of Environment. That there is operation headquarters that was created in April based upon the initiative of the Parliament, and so these headquarters, they operate, and there is a working group there. The experts, different scientists from 70 different institutions, universities, and so on. So today they will discuss the technique for calculation of losses to the atmospheric air. That's a topic which is subject to the discussion. There is no such technique in the West. something that was emitted in the air, it then fell on the forest or on the soil or on the water, and this is how the losses are calculated. So that working group works. It also has the experts of UNESCO. Their expert opinion will be important to us. The representatives of state environmental inspection, they are still afraid of the journalists. I asked them about some press release upon the results of that meeting. They do a great job, so I don't know why are they afraid of the journalists. But talking about the plan that the colleague from the Ministry of Environment mentioned about the 18% increase of the forest area, well, we have no more land to plant those trees on. I'm writing about that issue for years. We don't have land where to plant new forest. So let's set normal goals so that we're not ashamed in front of ourselves then. That's a very important topic where those funds will be transferred, that we will receive, where to invest those funds. For example, my proposal is to stop issuing grants to the developments of the peat reserves. And those permits, they are still being issued, and this is the environmental catastrophe. Dear friends, any more questions on the floor? Yes, after the missile attacks, there was a fund created where the funds are being accumulated, provided by international partners and donors, to be forwarded on recovery of energy infrastructure. Don't you plan to initiate a similar fund from where the funds will be forwarded to recover our environment in future? Yes, we work in that area to have this recovery fund established, and based on that fund we want to have the international organizations involved to have all those applications considered, those projects that could be implemented in that area to improve the condition of our environment. So yes, the work is underway in that area. Well, when you started your address, you mentioned those 2 trillion hryvnia losses, and you mentioned 10 trillion hryvnia losses also to the soil, and resources. So what exactly are you talking about? Those preliminary environmental data. I think that today the law took effect, and they already have the Commission on Natural Resources. They already have the authority to calculate that figure. That's their preliminary calculation, and it was related to the loss of natural mines, the oil and gas fields in the Crimean region, in the Black Sea regions. So that was calculation of losses inflicted by the fact that we lost those gas and oil mines. Questions on the floor?
My name is Lorenzo Cremonesi, and I write for Corriere della Sera. Sorry, I rushed here to your meeting. I was late, I'm sorry, because I consider this subject very important. And if you have a way to influence European public opinion, environment, globalization of the problem of of the heating of the climate change, all these subjects are absolutely major subjects from Italy to France to Germany, all over Europe. But let me say I'm a bit disappointed. I was really waiting to have data. You are discussing among yourself, how can we try to reach the foreign media, the international media, the attention of the world. This is the way. But please give us data. The 3 data that I got this morning are 3, basically. One, more or less, 100 major industrial plants had been burned, destroyed, creating problems. About 100,000 tons of oil burned and again created pollution. and I don't know if 2 trillion hryvnia damage, more or less. That's not enough. We already read it last year. We need more data from you. We need more way to substantiate this stupid Putin war, which really is anti-history, is anti-historical, and it's creating big problem to a global problem, which is a global of climate change. But to do that, we need data. We need way, for instance, the Dnipro River, of course, was polluted, because when bombs fell, and there is not only a problem of electricity, because the electricity is a problem of water. You cannot pump water, but also when you cannot pump water, you cannot clean water. The sewage go freely to the river. The river go to the Black Sea. The Black Sea arrive to the Bosphorus. The Bosphorus come to us, to the Mediterranean, to Italy, and to all over the world. So it's, as Mr. Oleg said, it's a global problem. But in order to make it clear, real, we need data. We need to have from you way to describe this question to our public. Thank you.
Я думаю, це дуже корисна обмін інформацією. Ви чуєте від
Well, you're hearing the feedback right away from our foreign colleagues, because this subject is urgent not only among the professionals who deal with environmental issues, but it's a top priority subject for all the countries, for all the Western countries. Thank you for this question. I understand that the journalists, they need the figures, they need the facts, they need something that can be used to illustrate the fact that really the country suffers some losses, some damages, and we see it in our mass media that upon the request of the journalists, because the journalists are really curious about the facts and the figures, so we see some big figures. We were inflicted losses in amount this and that, but our question is that I'm talking about the purpose of our course. We can mention different figures for the journalists, and the government officials may generate them for the journalists, so it's important to talk to them. But our course, our goal was to have those figures accepted not only by the journalists we supported anyway, but to have those figures accepted by the judges in international courts. And in order to do it, we have to do everything diligently. Maybe we should not rush with the figures. We have to document everything properly. We have to calculate everything properly. And moreover, there is no access to a lot of places, and the war is still underway, and we cannot mention any final figures. So sharing your request and understanding it to the full extent, I want to mention that not all of the figures that pop up in the mass media upon request of the journalists may be such that would be accepted by the judges in international courts. Thank you. I would like to add from myself that the Ministry of Environmental Protection maintains a weekly report digest of damage to the environment. I think it's a weekly digest, and it's based on the data received from state environmental inspection. There are experts involved in its preparation, so you can sign up to this digest. Please use this opportunity. And if you don't find contacts, we will be able to help you with that. And there are many foreign journalists who already signed up, and I myself was a witness when foreign journalists brought up that issue of damage of the sea mammals, the dolphins in the Black Sea. So there are figures in that digest, and the calculation of those figures posted on the official website ekozagroza.gov.ua. They are made by the qualified inspectors. Those are the technical details disclosed to the public. The way of calculation may be not so interesting to the journalists, but the figures are there. Well, and one of my lectures in this section, in the fourth module, how to unveil this topic, is how to find the sources of information. What sources of information can be of interest? I will send you the text. You may leave your email for me. I will send it to you, and you will be able to translate it using Google Translate. Are there any more questions in the studio? Thank you.
From Sankei Shimbun, Japanese newspaper, thank you for my taking question and very important presentation. Couple of questions. First, could you elaborate on how difficult to calculate to inspect environmental damage under the situation? The war is still going on. I think it's really dangerous and it's really difficult to reach the spot of damage. And the second, how do you estimate the damage, negative impact on agriculture, grain and the food production, which is the main industry economy for Ukraine? And third, could you explain your image of process, how this damage should be compensated? How could you get enough resources or money to compensate?
Дякую. Хто візьме це? Перше питання було питання щодо компенсації.
Thank you. There was a question about a detailed method for calculation of losses and the damage inflicted on the agriculture. Thank you. Well, there is really a number of places where it's very complicated to get to. So as it was mentioned by my colleagues, it could be only finally documented after those places become safe and secure for the inspectors who can get there, because it involves some actions related to technical documentation, like sampling of the soil, for example. They require physical presence in a place which is already demined, because if we talk about drawing up of some documents, there are places that are mostly contaminated because there are still active battles going on in those areas. I was personally present in Drevlyansky Reserve in the north of Ukraine with my colleagues. There were forests damaged, young forests and relic forests, and it's difficult to study those areas because it's contaminated with mines, and the demining will take decades actually, so it's very difficult to work there. So this issue is still being questions, how to do it in a way where how can we extrapolate or calculate losses in a different way about the places that are difficult to get to. So yes, you are right, it's difficult to get there really, and it's difficult to work there. What I wanted to add is that us Ministry of Environment, together with the State Emergency Service of Ukraine and the Ministry of Defense, we developed the resolution. You can get it's an official document already posted on the internet. So in coordination with them, we cannot put the inspectors under threat. So those areas can be studied only after they are demined. All those forests and the fields, you know, our land is very densely contaminated with the mines. It's very difficult, and specifically in terms of those calculations. So Also, regarding the water resources, it's quite difficult to monitor them, to take samples of water. We don't have a right to put any inspector intentionally put them in jeopardy for sampling water or other specimens. So yes, it will take some time. We will be facing a lot of challenges, but the main thing I want to say is that us as a Ministry of Environment, we are being addressed to provide some information related to the losses. So you understand, there are court proceedings opened in relation to all the episodes, and those documents, the pictures, the footage, they are all parts of those criminal proceedings, and they can be only promulgated upon the consent of the investigator. So you can apply to the headquarters, to the Ministry of Environment. We will provide you with all the information necessary, but if you need some information about some specific land plot or from some business, it should be already requested from the headquarters so that they're able to provide you with that piece of information. Thank you. Well, to solve this issue, we can be aided by the modern intellectual technologies, intelligence technologies. We may use some satellite pictures, the pictures before the invasion, before the forest fire, before the shelling. Well, not all of the satellite images are free, so this is why our environmental inspection may use some help in acquisition of such images. We have our technologies for processing of those images, but in some cases it would be good to obtain some Western up-to-date technologies. For the time being, we don't have some processing center for those images. If we may raise funds to create such center which could be able to process those images. So the idea of this project is something that I'm mentioning here. If someone may come up with some idea how to create it, with having the community involved, having the relevant experts involved, that would be just wonderful. Well, there was also an equation regarding the agriculture in Ukraine. Ukraine is an agricultural country, and we have to maintain the proper level of food products. And I can tell you what the agricultural expert who was acting Minister of Agriculture, Olga Trofimtseva, she's now the special ambassador of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. So we had a conversation with her, and in response to my question on how to properly position the fact that Ukraine is a major exporter of agricultural products, she said that fortunately Ukraine is a very big country. We have vast territories, and obviously we have big areas that are really contaminated, where the consequences of the invasion was very visible. But fortunately there are also sowing areas which were not directly reached by those factors of influence. Ukraine has an experience. We had the Chernobyl disaster, and still Ukraine is one of the leading exporters of the agricultural products in the world. Not only in Europe, we have certain mechanisms that's a part of the competence of our agrarian specialists on how to mitigate the consequences of Russian aggression for safety of agricultural products where it is possible. Thank you. Thank you, dear friends. Unfortunately, we have to wrap up our conversation. Our time is expiring. I want to thank our journalists for the interest to this topic. I want to thank all of our speakers, and I'm reminding you that we will continue discussing the topic of environmental protection in 5 minutes. We will talk about the support of our agrarians and spring sowing campaigns. Bear with us, work together for our victory, and glory to Ukraine.